Good day, everyone. Welcome to our session today. My name is Benjamin Muindi. In our class today, we are going to talk about specialized writing. And under specialized writing, we are going to discuss one of the forms of specialized writing that is called political and parliamentary reporting. Welcome to the session. Well, in our previous classes, we have had a look at different forms of specialized writing. We have had a look at health reporting, for instance, business reporting, environment reporting, finance reporting, war reporting, and so on and so forth. And the focus of our class today is going to look into the whole idea of governance, reporting on issues to do with politics and representation of society or representation by members of parliament on behalf of citizens. And just to give us some quick recap or quick background into the idea of political and parliamentary reporting, just to see what is the antecedent of political and parliamentary reporting, is that when we are looking at governance and we are interested in understanding where do parliamentary systems, where did they originate from, what is the source of the idea or the concept of parliamentary system, we trace this to ancient Greece, being the source of parliamentary reporting. But it was not the kind of reporting that, it was not the kind of parliamentary system that we presently have or how parliaments are currently constituted globally. But the initial idea was that everybody would be able to represent themselves on matters that were regarding the goings-on in the society. If there's a vote that needed to be cast on whatever it was the issue of the day, everybody in the society would make a vote, and that is what used to be called direct democracy. Interestingly, the idea of direct democracy, where everybody would make a vote for something or for an issue or a phenomenon that was touching on the society, was only a preserve of the male adults. So when you're investigating to what extent this was a democracy, then in that regard it failed in the parameters of meeting the gender equality or being representative of all groups in the society, because only the male could vote on issues that were affecting society or laws and policies that were being made in society. And with increased population, population ballooning, and having a lot more citizens in the society, the idea of direct democracy increasingly became logistically challenging because not everyone could participate directly in a parliamentary system. And that led to now what we understand as representative democracy. And representative democracy now is where the people's will then started being expressed through certain members who are representing them, and these are the people now we call members of parliament. And it is this tradition that has now been passed over for many decades and generations over time until today, and it is what has given rise to a parliamentary system of governance across the world, as we currently understand it, where people now do elect members of parliament, and it is these members of parliament then who assemble in the place that we call parliament, and they pass laws, they pass proposals, they rubber stamp ideas on governance and protocols of governance, and therefore it becomes very, very important as a specialized form of writing for people who are in the area of writing and reporting to understand how then can we report or how can we write from the institution that is Parliament. But before I delve further into this, just like I've already hinted, that the Greek assemblies did not have room for women, that they excluded women, and it's only male adults who are supposed to be making a vote regarding the goings-on in the Greek society. But this phenomenon has already been overtaken because of a lot of agitation coming from human rights quarters or human rights groups, and calling for the notion of universal suffrage, where women now are included and are part and parcel of the governance system of almost every other society in the world. It's important to point out that there are some parliaments in the world today, like if we give the example of Rwanda, where we actually have more women representing the citizens than the male MPs in the chambers. And I actually think that's a very interesting development, looking at where the whole concept of parliament started, that we did not even have women at all. So in Parliament, democracy works in the idea of majority rule. And what majority rule is that whenever there is an issue that is being voted on or it's being debated on, the people who are elected to represent the voters on whatever issue it is, they make a decision. And this decision is based on the principle of majority rule. So whether it's on issues of security, issues of health, issues of education, whatever it is that the issue is being discussed by parliamentarians, at the end of the day, majority rule is what carries the day. That even if a vote is cast and you know, the vote is won by one extra member of parliament in what you might think as a neck and neck or a tie kind of a vote, then majority rule takes the rule of, takes the day in effecting that particular decision. And therefore, when you think how parliaments make rules or make laws, make policies, or come up with structures that enable society to be governed in a civil way, then majority rule becomes a key principle that underpins democracies across the world. But by the time parliamentarians get to you know, coming with a majority rule, behind the scenes there is usually a lot of lobbying, there is a lot of persuasion, and sometimes if you look at the two chambers of the House, the governance or the government side and the opposition side, sometimes members crisscross the floor depending on the motion or depending on the law that is being debated. So that's a global perspective, and also a background and historical context just to understand our topic of the day. If I might now come into the Kenyan context, presently we are in a new dispensation of a form of governance in Kenya that is what is called the devolved government. And the devolved government is now almost in it's more than 10 years since this form of governance took effect once Kenya enacted or promulgated a new constitution. And it is this new constitution that brought or ushered in a new order of governance in the society. So what does the devolved government of Kenya look like, and how does parliament then fit into the structure? If we look at the idea of democracy coming from the people, you know, governance being the fact that it is a government that is formed by the people, for the people, you know, and to express the will of the people through the governance structures. These structures are leveled at different tiers, And the main or the key tiers are what is being illustrated in this graphic. And we have the National Assembly, we have the Senate and the Judiciary on the upper side here. Before the devolved government came into effect, we did not have Senate here, which is now called the upper house. It's a new addition as a form of oversight into the devolved government. And then we have the National Assembly, which is the lower house. And there has been no major change in terms of how that house is constituted from the previous regime and now onto a new legal regime. And so is judiciary, except for how the structures of judiciary do work. And what the devolved government means basically is that government is divided into two tiers, that there is the national government and then there is the county governments. So affairs that have to do with governance at a national level, they are facilitated or they are presided over by the President of Kenya, who is helped or who is assisted in running the government by a deputy president and a cabinet. And under the cabinet, which is composed of cabinet secretaries, we do have national civil service, or previously what used to be called the public service. So this includes civil servants who are drawn from various departments, ministries, areas of administrative units at the national government. So the new structure has got what we call the county governments, and presently we do have 47 counties that have been demarcated since the constitution was passed. That means we have 47 county governments across the country. And while the National Assembly, or while the Parliament, that is the lower house, is in charge of representing national issues, debating national issues, passing laws that are touching on national issues, the Senate is the arm of Parliament that now is in charge of looking into the affairs of the county governments. But the county governments also have got their own parliaments, what we call the county assemblies. And the county assemblies are constituted just like the National Assembly, only that these are the parliaments within the level of a county. And each of these counties then are made up of members of parliament who are called MCAs, members of county assembly. The equivalence of a president in a county is the governor, and the governor is assisted in governing the county by the equivalent of cabinet secretaries, and at this level they are called county executive secretaries. And then the equivalent of civil service or national civil service at the national level is the county civil service. So there's a mirror of the national structure of government being mirrored at the county level in that regard. And then Senate is the parliament that is in charge of discussing things that have to do with the affairs of county governments across the country. So whether it is issues to do with revenue allocation, mostly revenue allocation is one of the main area that Senate looks into in regard of how county governments are allocated funds, and there's a formula that is usually used, and it is Senate that discusses that. But the judiciary is the one now that interprets the laws that are made by both National Assembly and the Senate. And whenever there's a dispute, or sometimes what it's usually called a legal lacuna, or there's a legal dilemma that members of parliament, either at the national level or at the county government, are not able to resolve that, the matter is usually referred to judiciary, and then judiciary is able to provide an explanation or an interpretation of the law, and then the dilemma is resolved, and either the law is accepted or the law is rejected, depending on the presidential assent. And we shall look at some of these terminologies in our session today, and in what regard or in what ways should journalists who are actually involved in specialized writing at the parliamentary level understand some of these protocols. Then finally, we do have constitutional offices and constitutional commissions, and these are independent bodies that have oversight mechanism and authority, and they've been given this from the Constitution of Kenya, which is the supreme law. And some of these bodies include bodies like the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, the Teacher Service Commission, the National Police Service, or the National Police Commission, among many other constitutional offices and constitutional commissions. So in an overview, this is how the Kenyan governance system works, but our concern is not entirely on the it's not entirely on the devolved structure of government, but we are looking at the arm of government that is in charge of making law. So Parliament makes laws. You're probably aware of that at this stage, but laws don't just come from Parliament alone. There are different laws, and especially if you look at the Kenyan context, there are different laws that govern Kenyan society, but they are not necessarily coming from Parliament. And examples of these laws is, one of the main laws is what you call the Constitution, and the Constitution is referred to as the supreme law that governs and binds society together. And this law is supreme because the people of Kenya, and wherever there is a constitution across any jurisdiction the world over, people go into a vote. And once the constitution has been proposed and the clauses and the provisions of this particular law are being put forward, the people enter into a referendum to either accept or decline passing a particular supreme law. And Kenya had a referendum in 2010, and then in the August of 2010 we did promulgate a new constitution, which has now facilitated the previous discussion on devolved government that I was talking about. But Parliament can play an important role when we are understanding the Constitution. Once a Constitution has been passed, Parliament can amend certain clauses of that Constitution. And usually a referendum is again required. So at the moment there is a movement towards a new kind of amendment into the Kenyan Constitution, and this is what parliamentarians are calling the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative, a kind of an amendment that is being introduced into the 2010 Constitution to change different things, including how the political structure and governance of Kenya and so on and so forth. So Parliament plays a critical role in ensuring or in facilitating the kind of referendum or changes that are being enacted within a constitution. But mainly parliaments are tasked, or the main province of parliaments across the world is to deal with written laws, and this is what you call statutory laws. And parliaments across the world have a duty to come up with laws, and we shall see briefly in coming slides how these laws are made, how they are introduced to Parliament, and to get a brief understanding on the process of making law within the parliamentarian system. And that is why I have highlighted this in red, because it is the concern of our discussion that is the duty of Parliament, to make laws, to write laws, to debate laws, to amend laws, and so on and so forth, as long as they are what you're calling statutory laws. So Kenya, being a colony of the British, since we gained independence from the British, there had been some laws that were in effect at the time of colonization and during the period of Her Majesty's government, you know, Her Majesty's government ruling the Kenyan cell among many colonial cells across the world, and Her Majesty's government enforced the English law, what we call common law. So common law, you know, laws that are originating from England or from London governed society. And over time, since Kenya became independent state, we have been trying to change some of those laws that are not congruent to the society, that are not congruent to social norms, among many other things. So another form of law is judge-made law, and judge-made law comes from what you call precedent. And precedent is whenever judges are making a ruling on a particular case, and as a result of that ruling, they set a precedent. So they set a kind of a benchmark or a reference for other cases that would be similar to the one that is being debated, but also that touch on issues that are similar to the one that is under litigation. And as a result of that, then judges refer to other laws that have been made, other cases that have been decided by other judges in previous judgments for them to come to a determination of a case. And then we also have customary laws. You know, these are laws that within different communities or different communal setups, people do ways of doing things that is enforced, that is binding. So if you think about things like marriages or dowry, how to pay dowry, you know, relationships in different communities and so on and so forth, they are governed by certain protocols, and that forms the basis of customary law. And then finally, there is what you call international law, and international law is now what enables countries to live or coexist harmoniously. So there are certain charters, treaties, and agreements that have been signed by different blocks of countries, or even at an international level, so that society and the global society lives in harmony or at peace with itself. So when we are discussing the ideas of law, it's important to differentiate that law and policy are not one and the same thing. That law itself is being defined as a body of rules of conduct within a particular jurisdiction, and these rules of conduct have a binding legal force and effect. They are prescribed, they are recognized, and they are enforced by a controlling authority, such as the police officers or different arms of government that are mandated to enforce that particular law. But when it comes to a policy, you know, I would say it is a scenario of egg and chicken. It is the policy now that leads or precipitates in the formation of law. So you have a policy being a kind of an outline that a government agency such as a ministry or whatever agency it is proposing certain ways or certain frameworks of doing things or wishing to achieve certain issues or certain ideals, and then from that proposition, then parliamentarians debate, and sometimes the policy can stand on its own, and in other times a new law can be enacted from a policy document that is originating from a ministry. So you think about things like if it's a Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and so on and so forth, they wish to achieve something else, something within society. For instance, the Ministry of Education would wish to achieve free primary education, or what you call universal education, within certain time frames. And in order for them to achieve that, every child going to school without having to pay, from kindergarten all the way to university, that's a policy that a ministry would come up with. So to effect that policy of the ministry, you need to come up with certain laws that would put things like finances in place and so on and so forth, so that the policy can be achieved. So a policy sets out the goals and planned activities of government, but it will need laws to implement. They have a complementary relationship in that regard. So when we are discussing law, we are discussing policy, and this is being viewed in the context of writing. It's important to understand that the media itself has a very critical role that it plays in society. And the media is usually seen as the eyes and the ears of society. So whatever laws, whatever policies, whatever protocols that governments are coming up with, or representatives of the people in Parliament are coming up with, it is the role of the media, it is the role of journalists who are tasked with writing issues to do with Parliament, being the ears and the eyes of citizens. And in this particular case, we are talking about the Kenyan context. And because not, like I said, coming from a democracy that was direct democracy, not everyone then is able to cast their vote or to debate in the chambers on issues that are of importance to them. Then parliamentary reporting becomes a specialized area that is very important and plays a critical role within the Kenyan jurisdiction and how society is governed. So now let us look at some of critical issues, some of important concepts that we need to understand about parliamentary reporting, and procedures and protocols of doing things that enable journalists to become effective ears and eyes of the Kenyan society, or globally to the society in general. So for someone who is doing specialized writing and your area of specialty is Parliament, one of the most important things you need to cultivate is a good network. And a good network is not just about having good sources with MPs or senators, but it also extends to having a network with important people, or people who are in key offices within the institutions of Parliament and Senate. And in this regard, I'm saying people like personal assistants of MPs and senators, people like drivers of these MPs. They might look insignificant in a way, but for a journalist, these are important people, because if you give them a call, they might give you, or they are likely to give you, very critical information that can enable your reporting. It is also important to understand that parliamentary reporting itself is a very sensitive assignment, and it is sensitive because there are certain ways or tradition of doing things within Parliament that enables it to be what it is, and it becomes extremely important to understand things such as what we call parliamentary procedures. So a journalist or a writer who is specializing in the area of parliamentary reporting, one must understand the Constitution. So I've already spoken about what the Constitution is, being the supreme law, and what are the provisions of this particular Constitution that enable Parliament to function, or now enable parliaments across Kenya to function, talking about Senate and the 47 county assemblies dotted across the nation. It's also important to understand the parliamentary procedures and standing orders. What are the protocols of doing business? How is a motion moved? How is a motion adjourned? What are some of the privileges that MPs enjoy and immunities while they are doing the business or they are conducting parliamentary business? And what are points of order when this is happening? So it's important for a specialized writer to become very familiar with all this and what they mean. But also very, very important is something I hinted on, the idea of lawmaking, to understand what it means as first reading, second reading, and third reading of the law, and then things like presidential assent. And what does presidential assent mean? So how bill is transformed into law is how a law comes into effect. And a bill is a proposal. So a bill is a law that is being proposed, and members of parliament need to debate whether that is a good law, whether that is a bad law. And for this to occur, the bill has to be introduced to parliament, and sometimes a bill can be introduced as what is called a private bill, meaning that it is being brought by a member of the parliament, a member of a parliament or a representative of the people, but this person is not in the side of government. So that is what we call a private bill. And we also have other bills that are called public bills, and these are bills that are being introduced by members of parliament or representatives of the side of the government. And basically these are bills that are touching on issues that have to do with governance, things like finances, voting of certain vote heads, and so on and so forth. And then for this to become law, there is a voting that takes place, and this is what I was explaining earlier on as the idea of majority rule. Majority rule. So the voting is on the basis of majority rule, meaning that it is the most people who take a side on an issue who take the day. And the concept of reaching the majority rule has different stages. Firstly, once the bill has been introduced by a member into the chambers, the bill is also entitled to scrutiny by members of the parliament, by members of society. So there is what you call public participation. That this proposed law, people meet in different places to discuss how the law is going to affect them, or how what changes it's hoping to bring. And a lot of the times when there's a bill that is being proposed, there is what you call stakeholder meetings. And stakeholder meetings are meetings with people who are mostly directly affected by these laws. So you can think about a law that is talking about conservation, for instance, of the Masai Mara, and you want to introduce a new law that is going to determine how the wildlife and the people of Masai Mara interact with each other. You will need to consult the people of Masai Mara within that context. So you will have a consultative meeting or a public hearing of the law. Then it is brought again to the chambers after it has been debated and heard by the public, and then it goes through now what you are talking about here, the first, the second, and the third reading, before it is later on now taken to the president for either signing it into law, which is what is called a presidential assent, or rejecting it with certain comments and saying that the law needs to be amended in one way or another, and gives an explanation as to why that law is going to be amended. So in this process then also, as a journalist or someone who is involved in this particular way of specialized reporting. You also need to understand what role does the Speaker play, what role does the Deputy Speaker of National Assembly play, and what role does the Speaker of Speaker and the Deputy of Senate play. You also need to understand how are leaders of the House, and the House here means Parliament itself, how are they elected? You know, the constitution of leader of majority and leader of minority voting. And then what is the role of the reporters? You know, the people we are concerned with investigating their role have a special area where they sit or where they do their business that is called the press gallery. So here are some points that we need to take out in our class today. And one of the points that we need to take out here is as a specialized member, as a specialized writer in the House, you need to understand that you're a stranger in the House, meaning that you have been invited there, and your business is to be the ears and to be the eyes of the people of Kenya, and you need to operate within the rules of Parliament. So you need to observe that, and the traditions and the standing orders, how business is done, you need to adhere to that and also observe that. But more importantly, you also need to understand the laws that have been passed in relation to how Parliament is run, and there is what you call the Powers and Privileges, the National Assembly's Powers and Privileges Act that really goes into explaining or providing for how Parliament is going to be run. You shouldn't carry devices such as tape recorders, because these are not allowed in the chambers, because Parliament itself provides its independent feed. So, and in the Kenyan context, for instance, the Kenyan Parliament works with KBC, and they provide feed to other stations, and they can get that, they can get a signal from KBC. So you will not need audio, you will not need to carry your video cameras, unless sometimes you are dealing with House committees, and I'll speak about House committees shortly in coming slide. The only thing that you can bring to the gallery is it's just your notebook and your pen, and listen and just take notes on what are the deliberations of the House at that particular point. And it's not always like this. If KBC is not, for instance, KBC machines or equipment are faulty, Parliament in its own discretion can allow, let's say, NTV or KTN or whatever other station it is to make their shoot from inside the chambers. So Parliament operates in what we call parliamentary committees, and parliamentary committees are kind of small cells where MPs now group themselves according to areas of interest, if I might use the phrase area of interest. So you might find that, or areas of specialization, that there are MPs who are in the areas of Education Committee, Health Committee, Security Committee, and so on and so forth. And these committees now debate issues that have to do with that particular specialty. And therefore, it's also important for one to understand how this works, and what are the protocols of House committees, and at what point can reporters make news from these committees. Some of these committee hearings are usually private because they want, or they seek to gather consensus or an understanding of an issue before they bring it to the floor of the main House. So sometimes reporters might not be allowed to, you know, be part of the House committee hearings, discussions, and so on and so forth. But a lot of House committee meetings are usually open to journalists, and if you are a specialized writer in this regard, you would understand how to go about seeking information from parliamentarian secretariat to understand whether it's a closed or open House committee hearing and so on and so forth. And this is the point I was saying, that networking becomes very important, because you not only become acquainted with the members of parliament, but you also understand the secretariat staff, so that these people can tell you that journalists are allowed to enter in this particular committee hearing or not. Okay. Parliamentary immunity is something that is very important, that needs to be understood by anyone who is writing, or who is specialized in writing from Parliament. And just coming from our understanding of immunity, it means that someone is protected from something. So when we say someone has immunity, they might not be able to contract, let's say, a certain virus and so on and so forth. So parliamentarians also have a kind of immunity while they are doing their business, and while they are in the precincts of Parliament itself, they enjoy a certain legal freedom, such that they can say things that are not necessarily true, or they can make some very unverified claims regarding the discussion that is going on. And those unverified claims, or things that are not necessarily true, do not need to be proven for the MPs, you know, to say them. And a lot of the times MPs really do exhaust this immunity. So it is for a specialized writer or specialized reporter to ask questions on the unverified claims, to go ahead and seek clarification on what the MPs meant when they say that, for instance, one member of Parliament has stolen, let's say, a given amount of money, and there is no evidence that is being provided to the chamber or to the speaker to interrogate that claim. Or when one member of the opposition makes a spurious claim or some outrageous claim about someone in government regarding unethical conduct, or let's say corruption and so on and so forth. It is up to the specialized writer then to go ahead and ask these critical questions, so that their reports can become verified. So how do media people go about, you know, what is the liberty? How do they go about asking this particular information and ensuring that the reports that they come up with are accurate, are objective, and so on and so forth? So there are laws that do govern how this business is conducted, and these laws are not universal. They cut across different jurisdictions. You know, there's a quote that I got here from Sebat et al., a group of scholars who have written extensively about what you call the normative theories of the press and how the press operates within the political structures of society. And they do say how the press then behaves in different contexts is it takes the form and the shape of the existing political structures of that government. So in Kenya, for instance, we have a very elaborate constitution that provides for very interesting clauses on what freedoms the press can enjoy, what protection that the press can enjoy when seeking information, and so on and so forth, or trying to impart that particular information. But Article 35 of the Kenyan Constitution really gives specialized writers a very important right to seek information. So if there is an MP, for instance, who is withholding information that a writer believes that it's critical to developing a story, or it's of public interest, then you can invoke the provisions of the right to information and ask the government agency or the particular government officer to give the information, and they are compelled to do so in giving the information. Or sometimes you can use the courts, use what you call judge-made laws in terms of freedom of information and so on and so forth to develop your stories. So the idea of absolute privilege, where an MP is making some claims about things, for it to be published must at least meet certain conditions. And before you do that, for instance, you must understand that the report needs to be fair, meaning that you've listened to both sides of the divide or both sides of the debate, and you do try to achieve balance and certain fairness in how you represent the issues. There is a thin line between balance and fairness, in the sense that while balance might be interested in numbers, that 3 people from the opposition and 3 people from the government being probably voiced in the narrative, fairness has got to do with putting yourself in the shoes, or probably trying to be sympathetic with the people who are forming the subject of that particular discussion. Then it also needs to be accurate. It also needs to be heard in public, means that like if it's a feed that is coming from KBC, then the entire country is hearing it, and that is what we call contemporaneously publication. It is being done simultaneously at the same time while it is actually happening on the floor of the House. And also the issue should not really be blasphemous or indecent, whatever the degree of blasphemy or indecency we are talking about, and how specific contexts can constitute blasphemy and indecency. So just kind of a quick rundown on what does it really mean to be fair and accurate when you're reporting or when you're specializing in Parliament. It's that you need to convey the true impression of the proceedings, that you don't need to be biased, or you don't need to, you should avoid bias. You should also avoid untrue portrayal of the proceedings. Then you must also present both sides of the divide, as I've already tried to say. And then you must resist the temptation to emphasize on the weakness of one side over another one, just to make the story interesting. And also this rule also extends not just to the specialized reporter, but also to the people who are involved in the production of either the broadcast or the print material that is being discussed. So for an MP to then enjoy this idea of qualified privilege, or for a publication to enjoy qualified privilege, that it is being protected by Parliament, there are certain protocols that publication must actually meet, and one of them is that it should have been tabled in Parliament. So if you are writing a story on the basis of documents that have been tabled in Parliament, then you can enjoy a qualified protection or privilege. Or it could be a report of parliamentary proceedings or public meetings that are provided, or reports of public meetings during the hearing of the law, provided then this is fair and accurate and conforms to laws of libel or defamation, and there is nothing that is blasphemous or indecent, and also it should be in the public interest, that it should benefit society. And finally, this statement must be made by authorities. So you think about people like the police, people like the MPs themselves, and so on and so forth. And then that can qualify to qualified privilege. So let me just talk about the defense. Not just the defense, but also what are the consequences of if you don't meet, or if you don't observe this, checklist in coming up with your report as a specialized writer. You can be charged with what you call defamation, or libel, depending. And libel is when defamation is basically when you are defaming someone. You are making them appear or be seen as lesser in stature by right-thinking members of the society. When it is written, it becomes libel, meaning that it's being presented in permanent forms of writing. And publishing, when it is being said in terms of words that are being uttered, that is what we call slander. So if there is one MP who is making some very disparaging comments, and you are a TV station that is now airing that particular disparaging comments or comment about one MP by another, there is a likelihood then that you can be charged with slander, depending on what extent or what justifications you invoke for you to do that kind of publication. So when you talk about what are these forms that can constitute permanent form of publication, I have highlighted some of these, that you can have printed words, meaning that you can have one MP saying things about another MP, and that is written in a newspaper or an internet blog or internet newspaper and so on and so forth. Or this can be even in recordings such as video recording or movies, and also in pictures. All this can constitute the idea of a permanent publication, and therefore someone can be sued for either libel or a slander. So who can be sued? If you are the writer, you are the person who published the story, an MP or a legal representative of an MP can sue you as the author of the report. But they can also sue as whoever distributed it. So you're looking at the chain of distribution. They can also sue the printer. They can sue the editor of the particular publication. And on top of the editor is a publisher, and then there is appropriator who can also be sued. So there's a whole chain of people who can suffer damage and particular consequences to this. But you can also make a defense. And this is the last thing we are going to look into, on how you can make a defense if you are actually being sued. And you can say that there was justified, or there was justification and privilege, meaning that privilege, it could be what you said, absolute privilege, or justification in the sense that something was done without malice, and it was being said as a fair comment of public interest, and it was disseminated innocently to the members of public, and then the judges can listen to what it is that you're making a case for, and depending on this, then they can decide that they're going to charge you with certain with certain clauses, or they can either determine the level of damage that they're going to have whoever has been offended do this. The last thing I can say is probably then, what do we mean by blasphemous content or obscene content? Blasphemous content is one that is, for instance, denying the existence or ridiculing the Almighty or members of the Trinity, if you're a Christian, or profanely scoffing at scriptures. But there's a defense here if you're making a fair comment. For instance, if you're being accused of scoffing at the scriptures and you're asking some very objective questions about the scripture, then the judge can listen. And one of the examples here that I like is when people ask, for instance, the scriptures do say that, the Bible says that God rested on the seventh day. You know, someone could be making profane scoffing in the sense that, why is God resting on a seventh day? If God is God, God is not supposed to be tired. So what is God resting from and stuff like that. So you can make defense as a fair comment, that the judge can listen to your submission and then they can actually make a determination that you've made a fair comment in regard to blasphemy that is being said. And then the last thing is obscene content. And obscene content has got a certain operationalization in the sense that it is seen as writing that uses pictures in permanent form and with the intention to deprave and corrupt younger minds that actually open to immoral influences. So you think about things like pornography, lewd publications and stuff like that. So this is what brings us to the end of our class today on certain issues and protocols of parliamentary and political reporting. I do hope to see you for another class. Thank you.